live in 3, 2, 1.
Welcome to Actionable Intelligence. I'm Eric Greitens. Well, the big issue, of course, is the presidential election, and we are honored now to be joined by constitutional law attorney, author, and senior legal advisor to the Trump campaign, Jenna Ellis, to give us an update on what's happening right now. Jenna, thank you so much for joining us. Give our viewers an update, please, on where things stand.
Well, thanks so much, Eric. And of course, this election is so incredibly important, and it matters to the president, and it should matter to all Americans that we can have faith and confidence in the legitimacy of the outcome, whatever the outcome is. And so the Trump campaign has always been committed to making sure that we are preserving and protecting the U.S. Constitution and the law of the land, because we are a nation of rules. We are not a nation of rulers and Democrat operatives. So what we are looking at is some of the irregularities in some of these swing states, and we have now filed suit in Michigan, which is to ask that the counting be halted temporarily until we are granted access, meaningful access, to actually observe the opening and the counting of the ballots. That is required by law. And so this is, of course, being reported incorrectly by the mainstream media that we're asking to halt counting, period. That's not accurate. Always please go and read the Team Trump statements so that you can get the best and most accurate information. Don't just trust what the tweet storm says. And then we are also asking for a recount of Wisconsin. That's within the margin that is allowed by law. And we're seeing that there has been voter suppression. There have been instances of irregularities there. And so this recount, which is completely not unprecedented, is just to make sure that every legitimate vote is counted. Joe Biden said in his press conference today, Eric, that he wants to make sure that every vote is counted. Well, he's forgetting the key word: every legitimate vote. We don't want my dog's vote to count. We don't want dead people's votes to count. We don't want fraudulent ballots to count. So this is not about every vote. It's about every legitimate vote and protecting election integrity.
Yeah, and so we've talked, Jenna. We know obviously big issues in Michigan. We're looking at a recount in Wisconsin, and then also Pennsylvania. Rudy Giuliani and others were just up in Pennsylvania. Please give our viewers an update on what's happening in Pennsylvania.
Yes, so we are declaring victory in Pennsylvania. Of course, that has been a swing state that has very clearly gone to President Trump, and we are making sure that we will legally enforce, if necessary, the state law there. And so for Pennsylvania, again, this is where the U.S. Constitution in Article 2 requires that it's the state legislature that determines the manner of electors. It is not up to the governor. It's not up to the county clerk. It's not up to any other actor. It's certainly not up to the mainstream media to declare what method or what's most appropriate. It's up to the state legislature. The legislature has not acted in the last 9 months for the pandemic or for any other reason to change their election law. This has been done unilaterally by other unconstitutional actors to have ballots that were received after the legislated mandated deadline to count. Those are votes that are illegitimate in the eyes of the Constitution. So we are declaring victory in Pennsylvania, and we will fight to preserve election integrity there.
Yeah, and again, just to break this down for our viewers, because there can be, with the mainstream media and all of the different messages that go back and forth, the very simple constitutional argument is that the Constitution very clearly says that it's the state legislature which shall determine the time, place, and manner of elections, and that it's not up to a judge, it's not up to an election board to go in and change that it's only the state legislature that has the authority to do that. And yet in some of these battleground states, you've had judges, election boards who've gone in and changed that. Do we have that right?
Yes, and I appreciate you bringing up the judicial branch, because the role of judges here is to not be activists. It's not to go in and change the state law by whatever they prefer, or to defer to other state actors that are outside the scope of what the U.S. Constitution provides for, which is whatever the legislature has designated, as long as that law is constitutional, equal protection. All of those things matter, of course. But here, we're not even into that province of even looking at the legislative action. We're even way outside of this. And so this should be a very, very simple call that for a judge, when we go to court and we are saying, Judge, please enforce the law, enforce the U.S. Constitution, that's asking a judge to act as an independent arbiter, fairly and appropriately apply the U.S. Constitution. That is their role. That is their job. It's like an umpire in baseball. You don't call a ball and strike based on whether you prefer it's a ball and strike. And you also don't say, hey, this is too political. One half of the stadium's going to be mad at me no matter what I do, so I'm not going to make the call. No, you make the call. You make it fairly. You make it appropriately according to the rule book.
Yeah, and Jenna, walk our viewers through what you think are the most likely things that they're going to see happening tonight and tomorrow. What are the next legal steps? What are the next steps that you're expecting either the Trump campaign to take or the officials who are responsible for announcing results to take?
Yeah, well, so it's been interesting to see that some of the states like Nevada and Georgia, who've halted their counts, are now projecting different timeframes on when they'll start recounting and other things. And so, of course, we're monitoring that very closely. In terms of our legal strategy, I don't want to get ahead of anything else that hasn't been announced, but just to make the American people very comfortable and confident in what we're looking at. We are observing all of these things very closely, and we will take legal action when and where needed, again, to protect election integrity and to preserve and protect our U.S. constitutional system.
Now, Jenna, one of the things that we've also seen happening, it's an issue you and I talked about before, is that big tech is also putting their hand on the scales. They've actually come in to censor certain voices. What's your recommendation to our viewers about how they can make sure that they are getting the latest and best and most accurate information about what's happening?
Yeah, well, the best place to turn for that, of course, is Team Trump. And so we will always make statements when those are available. You can look at the press releases that we have. You can also see the press conferences. And so be very, very hesitant on what a third party or an activist journalist says about what the Trump campaign is doing. So, I mean, we've already had people who are kind of inferring our motivations that are a completely twist of the narrative and other things. So make sure that you're going to donaldjtrump.com/press. You can always see what's most up to date. We also have, of course, our social media accounts. And, unless Twitter and other places flag them for false and misleading information, which is absolutely ridiculous. But you can always get that from us directly. And so make sure that you are staying on top of what's actually happening and the reasons that we're doing this, which will always, always be to protect and preserve the U.S. Constitution and the fairness of our elections.
Now, Jenna, we've only got about a minute left. We've touched on Michigan, we've touched on Wisconsin, we've touched on Pennsylvania. Let's also talk, if we can, briefly about Arizona. Arizona was called very early, and now a lot of organizations are saying that they called it too early. Please give our viewers an update on Arizona briefly.
Yeah, so I think it was very irresponsible for some of the news organizations to call that when you only had, I think it was around 11% of the votes that were in, and yet they wouldn't call Florida when clearly President Trump had that state won. So we still believe that Arizona is very much in play. And when we believe that we have won a decisive victory there based on the legitimate votes, then we'll certainly call that. And remember, it is not up to the media that determines who's the next president based on their projections. What matters is the certifications of states, which can be challenged legally if there is a legal basis for that. And then what ultimately matters is December 14th when the Electoral College votes. So this isn't up to the mainstream media. This isn't up to the Biden camp or even one candidate over the other. What matters is the law and fundamental fairness.
Well, Jenna, we so appreciate you. We know that it's been a late night for you and probably lots of work ahead. We appreciate you making the time to join us. Folks, that's Jenna Ellis, Senior Legal Advisor to the Trump campaign. Stay with us. We're going to be back with Victoria Tenzing and Joseph DeGenova.